Welcome to another episode of the Reboot Chronicles, a no-holds-barred forum with global leaders, authors, entrepreneurs, and CEOs about how organizations stay focused on growth and innovation in unprecedented times. I'm your host, Dean DeBiase, coming to you live from Reviv's North American headquarters in Chicago, and we would like to thank you for joining us from around the globe today. Hey, we'd like to welcome Tim Draper today, founder of Draper Associates, Draper University, DFJ, as we all remember back in the day. He was an early investor in Skype, Hotmail, Tesla, Baidu, Twitch, and SpaceX. Definitely want to talk about that today. And today we thought we'd kind of jump into how entrepreneurship, venture capital, global economy is literally being transformed before our eyes, and from the eyes of Tim, kind of cryptocurrency epidemics and the economic jolts that are going around the world right now. So Tim, good to see you back. You're looking good out there in Silicon Valley.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm kind of all alone in the office today. I gave everybody the option of coming in. It's we've got all the safety things worked out, and turns out I'm still the only one in the office.
Is that a piece of plexiglass in front of you, or are you just blurring the Skype background? You don't have to answer that. You know what might be helpful? I know all of our friends in Silicon Valley that you and I know you well, and but it might be nice just to talk about, you founded DFJ and then you founded Draper, and just maybe talk about a little overview of what's going on with those two.
Oh yeah, well I founded DFJ. Well, it was Draper Associates, and then it was Draper Fisher Associates, and then it was DFJ, and it grew to be so big that the decision-making process was more of an institution, and so safety became more of the model, and I realized that was not. You get the best returns in venture capital if you take big risks, and so I was in effect spun out. Think of me as sort of I was a part of a great band, and then I decided to build my solo career, and it turned out solo career is bigger than the band. So I'm very
for
happy
some artists,
yes. I'm happy at how it all worked out, and there were some investments that the partnership would never have made, and I made, and they really worked out. One was Bitcoin, and a number of others that have been great successes. And so, there was a point where I realized that there were 12 partners with equal votes around the table, and that the decisions became more safe, and I think our returns were starting to flatten out. And so I spun off and started Draper Associates, and haven't really looked back. It's been a really fabulous run.
Yeah, how big is the group, and how many investments you have going?
There's 600 portfolio companies in Draper Associates. We've been doing it for a long time. I've been investing for 35 years. I've spun off about 10 years ago, and a lot of those are percolating to become very large, and so it's kind of an interesting time for us where we keep running into these opportunities to fund companies with a ton of money, but we don't have the LP base for that, since it was just me spinning off, and then I took in a few LPs. It's been a little more difficult, and so we've had to hand up these sort of, like on a silver platter, these amazing companies to other venture firms who have big growth funds, and that'll probably change over time. We'll probably either have our own growth fund or just build relationships directly with big investors. So it's been great. I've loved being a supporter of entrepreneurs all these years, and I spun out, but I still love my original partners. And I love I've got a few partners now, and I love them too. I think I have chosen well. over the years.
You have. Well, there's a difference between a spin out and a blowout. So I think you did it well. It's like,
yeah, we kept it. We still have good relationship. We share deals. It's been terrific.
Yeah, the band can still get back together. Do you play any musical instruments? Sticking with the metaphor.
I have a couple of things. I have a bad voice, and I can write songs. And so I've written a few songs that I sang. You can look at it online. Something called The Risk Master that's about entrepreneurs. Something called The Bitcoin Hustle that's all about Bitcoin. And so I've had some fun with those. One called We Are One, which is like, hey, we're all one big world. Yeah. So but they're better when sung by other people.
Yeah, that's good. Supporting artists. I actually might link that to the podcast just to get back at you there. So you just mentioned a few words. I mean, it makes sense. You kind of love. First of all, you guys use the word love, which I love. But you actually enjoy the earlier stage stuff anyway, regardless of the fund size. That's one thing. And the other thing that you say a lot is you actually love entrepreneurs. You are in it for the entrepreneurial experience, for the relationship, for whatever it is. I mean, you and I have known each other a long time. It's like, I mean, I've seen that kind of ooze out of you. And there's a lot of other VCs just down the street from me that I don't see love in their vocabulary. It's not. It's not for the love of the entrepreneur. It's for the love of the return. So without getting ourselves into trouble, I just admire that. I don't normally say things like this.
For me, it's this feeling that you are driving progress. These entrepreneurs are driving progress forward. They're projecting out and figuring out what the world's going to look like 5, 10, 15 years out. And as I meet them, different patterns emerge. And so I can start to predict what's going to happen 5 to 10, 15 years out. And when you find a true entrepreneur, somebody who says, I always ask this one question, which is, why are you doing this? And I do it so that it's like, put them back on their heels.
Yeah,
and
here comes the elevator pitch.
Yeah. And the whole point is, if they say, well, I wanted to start a company, or I wanted to make money, or I want to make you money, that's not enough, because I know when you're an entrepreneur, the going gets super tough. And if you're not totally passionate about what you're doing, it's not going to work, because you'll leave the sinking ship if it's starting to sink. But the great entrepreneur will just say, no, we just have to keep sailing forward. We got to make this thing happen, and it bursts out of their chest when you ask them that question. Oh, because I worked for this other company, they didn't understand, and the customers would have really loved this, and I really want to. And when you see that, you kind of go, oh, okay, I get it. You're not going to stop. Whatever it is, you're not going to stop. And think about it. I mean, I've got to love entrepreneurs. We backed Hotmail. They made it so that we could all communicate. You guys don't.
And that was like the 90s, yeah.
People back that have been born recently don't understand what it was like not to be able to easily communicate with people, to have to pay $80 for a 5-minute phone call to South America. All of a sudden, Hotmail made it free to communicate with anyone, anywhere. And then Skype added to that. All of a sudden, I realized, oh my gosh, we've opened up the world. And so how can you not be invigorated by the transformations that these entrepreneurs create if you have been involved in some of those companies?
And a lot of times it's just business model transformation. I mean, back when you guys started Hotmail, I was running one of the first online games companies, and we charged by the hour. It was expensive. And I remember a couple of business plans floating around on our desks that were, people wanted to charge like X per email you sent. You'd get charged for every email you sent. Well, I'm glad we didn't go down that rat hole. That would have been an awful anti-stimulus. But you bring up an interesting point about entrepreneurs. I mean, at this one of the programs I teach at Kellogg is like finding your whole purpose. And to me, it's about checking some boxes around fun and money and impact and the intersection of all those. And you see that come alive in entrepreneurs' eyes. And if you just do things for fun, you're not going to make a lot of money. If you just do things for money, you're going to be miserable, and having impact in your life every day as an entrepreneur, it's a tough thing. As you know, it's a tough road, and they need people like you to back them. But I think you've talked recently about What's the future look like for venture capital entrepreneurs under the auspices of consolidation and compression, and not to mention a pandemic and a wobbly economy? What do you see coming down the road here the next 18 months?
It's interesting. First, you mentioned fun and impact and money,
Yeah.
and it's exactly the same thing we teach at Draper University. We say mostly fun,
Right.
but we also say you have to make money, because they're often big visions and kind of, oh, we're gonna feed the world and we're gonna create, whatever, but they aren't saying, this is the business model and this is how we're going to get there. And they aren't saying, hey, and this is going to be great because it's going to be fun because we do this. I think you've hit the three pillars of being an entrepreneur, a successful entrepreneur. No one ever hit a $1 billion market cap without having a lot of fun. Right. And no one did it without a great business model, and no one did it without having a true vision that people could get behind. So yeah, you've nailed that. Yeah. What does it look like going forward? Well, COVID's done a couple of things. One is people have been locked in place, and actually I'll take you back. When the internet came along, it transformed communications and information and media, gaming, entertainment, bunch of great industries. Right. They're pretty big. But I actually believe that we're about to go into a time where, with artificial intelligence and surveillance combined with Bitcoin, the blockchain, and smart contracts, you're going to see the transformation of the biggest industries in the world. You're going to see insurance and banking going through transformation already. Real estate, government itself, and healthcare, all the biggest industries except maybe oil, are going to go through a major transformation. And here's what I've noticed since COVID. There were a bunch of entrepreneurs going after some of these changes, and they were kind of pushing up the rope for a while. And it was just the early adopters who were getting involved. Well, now with COVID, people have been trapped in place, so they've been getting VR headsets and exploring VR. They've been using remote medicine. They've been using the Bitcoin wallets are going through the roof. Everybody is getting a Bitcoin wallet. The education is now very much online, and all those things sort of accelerated because of COVID, because we were all locked in place. So if there were any silver linings, we moved that part of society forward quicker. Yep. Now, how does venture capital change? Well, I've noticed I've actually started to fund companies where I've only met the person on Skype or Zoom. And that's something I normally would not have done before. And I'm almost able to get people's energy and that kind of thing, but a physical presence is a lot easier for me because I can see whether Absolutely. They've got this intensity that they're never going to go. So that's happening. The other thing that's happening in venture capital is that there's sort of this, the entrepreneur and the money are getting closer and closer together through these incubators and accelerators. And the value add from the growth people is getting to be smaller and smaller. And so those growth funds, I suspect, are going to have less and less value going forward. So we think that the value is really where we sit, which is at the deal flow level, where we generate the deal flow, we put our own companies together, we get them up and running. And then then the money becomes sort of a commodity, it becomes fungible. And I think down the road that, and this will get into one of your future questions probably, I think that we are going to have You know, by the way, as a venture capitalist, I pay a huge amount of money to accountants and a huge amount of money to lawyers to get this whole thing put together. Every deal, even though they're almost all exactly the same, each one has these little minutia that have to be negotiated, and it cost me a fortune. And then using dollars and going through a system that is not that secure, you need accountants. So I've imagined, and I'm hoping that the government starts to figure out that they can tax people in Bitcoin rather than just in dollars. But I see a future where I can raise money in Bitcoin. I invest it into a bunch of entrepreneurs in Bitcoin. They fund their employees and suppliers in Bitcoin. And whenever anything happens, my investors and everybody gets the amount of money they're supposed to get through a Bitcoin wallet. And the taxes get paid out in an automated, very automated way on the blockchain. Well, that can all be done with these things called smart contracts, which are when you use Bitcoin or any of the cryptocurrencies, you can actually create a contract completely in software, so that just think of it as a bunch of if, then, else statements, where if this much money comes in, then this person gets paid this much, and this person gets paid this much, and this person gets paid this much. And it can all be built.
Just a waterfall.
A natural waterfall.
So why don't governments want to do that? That sounds so efficient. You just saved, I'm thinking of the Warren Zevon song, Send Lawyers, Guns, and Money. It's like that whole entourage is getting smaller now. You're spending more money and giving more capital out to the entrepreneurs, or giving me a refund or whatever the application.
I was a big fan of Warren Zevon.
Yeah,
that guy. I got a chance to meet him. He wrote a song for my sister, actually, for her and her. She wrote it for her husband to sing to my sister.
Wow.
Anyway, that was great. Yeah. So here's the thing. Currently, we have a system which is this. I'm going to first describe liquidity. If you have a house and I have a farm, and we don't trade with each other or anybody else, you die of starvation and I die of exposure. But if I decide, okay, I'm growing watermelons, I'll give you a watermelon if I can stay in your house for a night. We make a deal, but then staying in your house for a night is worth more than one watermelon. So you say, well, look, you need to give me a lot more watermelons. And I go, well, look, you can't eat enough watermelons. And so that we came up with this bank as a place to sort of keep the credit. Like, okay, I'm going to just give you one watermelon for a night's stay, but I'm also going to give you credit for 40 watermelons for that night. And then we can sell those watermelons to somebody else. They can give me some money, and we can get it to you. So that creates this amazing liquidity. So once you've got liquidity, then we can build this huge global infrastructure that is all intermeshed, and we get amazing services and amazing products through this huge global infrastructure. And we have so much around the world. Well, now with COVID, they've cut off a lot of those, and so we have a separate problem there. But what happened was, we used to set up this bank with, say, gold, and then it was the promise of gold, and then it was the promise of silver or some heavy metal, and then it was the full faith and credit of the federal government. Well, now people are saying, well, wait, that full faith and credit is okay, but our currency drops 30% a year in value. So why are we it's like a hot potato I want to get rid of.
That's probably really hot now, giving out 21 trillion, I think it is. That's
yeah, they're giving away, in effect, the entire year's economy they're throwing that much more money into the system, and that devalues the dollar. And that's where people will go, wait a second, where do I want to put my money? Do I want to put it in the stock market? Well, the stock market's flying super high. We probably don't want to get too much involved there. Do I want to put it in gold? Gold is sort of the old security thing. No, you probably want to put it into Bitcoin, because Bitcoin, you know, there are only 21 million of them, and no political force is going to flood the market with Bitcoin. And so you know, there are other options. Real estate, yeah, maybe, but with this 6 foot thing is going to make it so that real estate's worth about half as much. Commercial real estate.
Talk to the theater chains right now. Life is not looking too pretty, but it could be a temporary.
And they were just getting to be fun again.
Exactly. But this is the watermelon analogy for. There's so many people, listeners, that just like they think they understand Bitcoin. They don't. Blockchain, all of that. So you kind of need the Tim Draper 101 there would be helpful.
Okay.
You said that Bitcoin is going to go up to maybe $250,000 per coin by 2023. It's like people go like, I don't understand what that is. How does that help me? They don't. So that's really not the most important part.
Right.
That's just
so
like
right now, if you bought a Bitcoin, it's $10,000. If you buy you can buy a dollar's worth of Bitcoin. You can buy 3 Satoshis, which is a tiny amount of money.
Fraction. And it's like buying gold, and you're hedging, it might go up. But 250,000 per from 10,000.
Right.
That's a nice jump. Wow.
And it started an upward trend now because people are not trusting their own currency as much as they used to, because the governments are flooding the market with money.
Yeah.
Just like any commodity, if you flood the market, the value of that commodity drops. So they're flooding it with dollars or yen or pesos or naira or bolivar. That's going to drop the value of those currencies. So Bitcoin can't do that. So Bitcoin only allows 21 million around the world. The way Bitcoin works is probably less interesting, but it's being it's being secured by thousands of computers that are checking its work. That's the way to think about it. On something they call the blockchain, which is this perfect ledger. It's like keeping track of debits and credits. Every time somebody makes a move, you buy or you sell Bitcoin, it keeps track of those things perfectly on the blockchain. And it has hundreds of thousands of computers that are checking its work. So you don't need an accountant with Bitcoin, or at least you don't need an accountant to do the bookkeeping or the things that they're normally doing. And you don't need an auditor because it keeps perfect records.
Right.
And then the other thing that you probably need to know about Bitcoin is it's much easier to send and receive money. You just put it on this thing.
Just send it over. I'm ready to receive.
In fact, if I had to send you money for this interview, it would be really super easy. I could send it to you right now. Just go through my Coinbase account or through a ledger or whatever. And ledgers are like, you're keeping your money on something like this, and you don't have to give it to people who are dressed like this. You don't.
And unlike Visa, Visa, MasterCard, Amex, you're not getting charged for that either.
No, there is no friction to a transfer of Bitcoin.
So what happens to them, the big 3 or 4, and the banks really, which is big 3?
I think the banks are freaking out a little bit because if you talk to your banker and he's being honest with you, he'll say, well, yeah, we've had an awful lot of our clients take money out of our bank and put it into Bitcoin or other cryptocurrencies. And so that money is what they live off. And so if you take 10% of your money and put it into Bitcoin or crypto, first of all, it's probably a good idea because you can go from country to country and it's accepted everywhere. But but the other part of it is that the banks now have 10% less money to manipulate and operate with, and take interest out and borrow against and all that. And so they are starting to say, whoa, and so every once in a while you'll see an announcement where somebody says, no one can buy Bitcoin with our credit cards, or no one can, or Bitcoin's not considered an asset by our bank, or whatever it is.
Right.
It's
trying
because
to devalue it,
banks,
debunk it. Right.
The banks are about to go through a real transformation, we call that, as opposed to, say, disruption, where they've got to adjust. They've either got to get on board and use these cryptocurrencies, or they run the likelihood that they become the dinosaur of the financial world.
And what about Visa, MasterCard? Will they end up controlling a lot of this?
Discover, all of those can actually make the move, and I don't know why they aren't. They've
been spending billions on acquisitions of fintech companies, but they haven't made a big move here.
They should be looking at this and saying, wow, we've got everybody's cards. All we have to do is Bitcoin enable them, and suddenly we've got their Bitcoin too. And the credit card people only take 0.5% every time you swipe your credit card, whereas the banks take 2.5% to 4%. They take a ton. The banks take a ton. The credit card companies don't take much, and that friction is a lot lower. And I'm not sure the credit card companies are. I don't think they're in love with banks anyway. So I've seen a bunch of companies that are creating cards. Mm-hmm. Tangem is one. SwissKey is one. That are actually where you can load and spend Bitcoin and other currencies, cryptocurrencies on them. I don't understand why these credit card companies aren't just jumping right in, either building their own base of technology around cryptocurrencies, or buying one of those companies.
It's going to be a build by borrow scenario. They all have decks from Accenture and everyone else that tells them what to do, but it's a little slow in the update. So when can I go to Home Depot and just pay with Bitcoin? When's that going to happen? That was one question that just came through the chat.
You can buy. You can get your Draper University tuition in Bitcoin. You can get Hero City rent in tuition. You can pay. In Bitcoin. You can pay at our retail store here in Bitcoin, and a lot of stores are opening up to the idea. In fact, I even took Bitcoin from some company that was being sold in China, and they were having all sorts of difficulties with the Chinese authorities and whatever else. And I said, well, can you send me Bitcoin? And they said, oh yeah, no problem.
Yeah.
And boom, I got my Bitcoin, and we were off to the races. And I prefer Bitcoin because I do believe that the Bitcoin is going to be worth $250,000 by 2022 or 2023, and it's only worth $10,000 today.
Yeah.
So I'm always taking Bitcoin, and I think in 5 years, maybe tomorrow you're not going to see Home Depot, but in 5 years, people will laugh at you if you're trying to pay with fiat currency, with dollars. It'll be like the old lady or old man who has a purse full of little pennies, and they're paying for their coffee with pennies. They're going to say, really? You're going to use that? You're going to use like bank money? What's that about? And so I think the world's moving that way. They don't know it yet, really. I mean, the early adopters do. They're the most passionate group I've ever met. But it hasn't crossed the chasm yet. And I think COVID has helped it cross a lot faster. So I would be very surprised if 70% of your listeners probably do have a Bitcoin wallet. And if they don't, they're missing out.
Yeah, we've got a mixture of both corporate audience, big time, and entrepreneurs. Speaking of that, just be good to get some parting words from you on besides fintech, given the digital acceleration with the pandemic and other things going on. Yeah, what categories do you like? As you know, I'm an advisor at Monetary Partners, so we're investing in food, and the next generation of supply chain on food is just really hot, and that is accelerating. But what categories do you like for the aspiring entrepreneurs listening in around the world?
Yeah, it's funny. People are
Who could
actually
pivot at
using
any moment based on what you say?
people are actually using um, the blockchain
Yep.
to monitor where the food comes from, so that you can take it all the way to the restaurant or all the way to the grocery store, and you can know what farm it went to, who sent it to you, what trucks it moved on, what pallet it was on. You're gonna be able to get it down to the exact, specific who handled this all the way through, and that's going to be really interesting, I think, for the consumer. I think it's going to improve the supply chain a lot, and if there's a bad batch, I think that will be identified much easier on the
Isolate it
blockchain.
quickly. Yeah, exactly.
And we've seen companies that are doing food where the finless food is fish that they actually manufacture rather than catching. There are a lot of new food sources that are kind of high in protein, but still vegetables. So food's going through a big transformation. I'm hot on healthcare. I think that data-driven healthcare is going to be a big deal, because you can now get so much information on a patient just through the cloud. So, for instance, it's not. We have a company called Cloud Medics that just says that just collects healthcare records, and they do a better job than the average doctor in diagnosing a patient. But combined with a doctor, they do even better. But what's happening now is you're starting to combine those healthcare records with genetic history and Fitbit results and what they ate for breakfast and the seat they sat on in the airplane and all that data. And all of a sudden, the diagnosis gets super good.
Yeah, it puts doctors in a different position too. It's like the
doctor has to start.
Power goes more to the consumer under this model, I think.
Right, and the doctor
we just had Naveen Jain on from Viome, who's got this whole testing algorithm going on, and so yeah, health, wellness, beauty, food. Anything else that you're hot on?
Yeah, I think education might go through a real transformation now, because
I hope so. Yeah, ed tech has never been that highly. The valuations have always
and whether it's
taking off again,
whether it's the unions, the union bosses destroying K-12 education, or it's tenure and all the overhead that's destroying the college system. All of a sudden, it's the flip school and the online education and the online offline education. All of that is starting to happen. The for-profit schools, all that's starting to come, and they're a threat to the establishment. They're a threat to the accreditation system, and they are changing education in a big way. And when there's change, there are great entrepreneurs, and those great entrepreneurs can weave their way through, build a wedge in the industry, and grow their piece of that industry. And I think I think education's going to go through a lot. I think government's going to go through huge changes, because what is government but a big insurance company? And insurance can be really done with an actuary, some surveillance, and smart contracts with all these people.
Yeah, if you unbundle everything they do, it's the last category to be digitized, really. Massive opportunity.
And they're fighting it a little bit. They're kind of going back to tribalism. We went global with the internet, and now the governments are going, wait.
Exactly.
Put the genie back in the bottle. because
yeah, it's not wait for me. It's like, wait, stop this.
Wait, stop, because we want to be tribal. Stay in place. Wear a mask. Whatever. And
we've got two.
And then they're cutting off trade across government places. But that, I think, is a temporary phenomenon. I think it's like the last roar of the dying lion, because we all know we're global. Whether the politicians admit it or not, we are global. And we have great relationships with Chinese. We have great relationships with Russians. We have great relationships with people, all of Muslims, all around the world. And but these governments are trying to put up these walls so that we fear them or whatever, so that they can justify being tribal again. We are global, people. Get over it. We're going. This is a global economy. We're so much better off. Think of the deal that we're doing between the guy with a house and the guy with a farm, and multiply that by 8 billion. We are going to have a real renaissance once we get through this sort of torturous period of where the tribalists try to keep us down.
Exactly. Well said. Tim, we want to thank you for joining us. And by the way, that's a lot of watermelons. I usually do a back to school edition. There's probably going to be a few episodes in the fall because there's so much going on. You just hit on 3 or 4 points that so we probably might want to have you join a university president and do I usually only have one person on, but for back to school, the future of education, I think we need a tit for tat there, and we'll get into it.
We could have we could have some great ideas that he could use at Northwestern. Or Kellogg. Where are you? You're at Kellogg.
I'm Kellogg Northwestern, but it could be any school. It could be your Stanford guys. It could be Texas. We'll see who wants to step up and get into it. You've been listening to Tim Draper. Great to have you on, and next time we'll do it in your office live.
Thanks, Dean.
Yeah. By the way, you're looking good without the haircut. I'd stay. I don't think you need to be.
Oh, you think I should do that? And I wear a Bitcoin tie. That's.
Oh God! Now that you can send me. I'll take one of those. All right, Tim,
I can't give this one up. This was a special gift. We were supposed to get some in. I don't know where they are. If we get them in, I will get out. You're on the list.
And you should sign them too. Just get a little tiny Sharpie. It'd be awesome.
You're going to have to start. Yeah, I'd be happy to. You're going to have to start wearing a tie again, though. That might be.
am. Yeah, Dean with a tie. It's been a while, but we'll get back to it. All right. Have a great one.
Thanks,
Take care.
Dean. Bye-bye.
All right.